People who've been kidnapped, how did you survive? I was 12 when this man in a gray hoodie approached me outside my art class. He knew my dad's name, Ryan, and said there had been an accident at the factory where Dad worked. He even knew I always bought strawberry Pop-Tarts from the vending machine after class. Your dad sent me to get you to the hospital, he said, showing me his phone with what looked like a text from Dad's number. My hands were shaking, but I got in his beat-up Honda Civic. He didn't drive toward the hospital. Instead, he got on Highway 52 going the opposite direction. When I asked where we were going, he pressed the door locks and said, "Change of plans, kiddo." I watched him throw my backpack out the window about 10 minutes later, including my phone. My stomach dropped when I realized what was happening. We drove for 2 hours. He kept the radio on some country station and occasionally offered me beef jerky from a bag on his dashboard. He wasn't mean or scary like the kidnapper movies I'd seen. He just seemed lonely and kept talking about how his daughter would have been my age if she hadn't moved away with his ex-wife. Finally, he stopped at a Shell station near some tiny town I'd never heard of. "Bathroom break," he said, walking me inside while keeping his hand on my shoulder. The women's restroom was small and dingy with a broken mirror and a trash can overflowing with paper towels. That's when I saw it. Taped to the back of the door was this faded poster about human trafficking. At the bottom, it said, "If you're in danger, leave a note where someone will find it." I didn't have paper, but in my jacket pocket was the receipt from the art supply store where I'd bought paintbrushes earlier. Using a stubby pencil from the same pocket, I wrote, "Help. Kidnapped in gray Honda. Please call police." I folded it tight and dropped it behind the trash bin, hoping someone would eventually clean back there. When we left the gas station, he drove us deeper into the woods to this old trailer with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. There was no electricity, but he had battery-powered lanterns everywhere. He gave me a sleeping bag and some crackers, then locked the door from the outside. Through the thin walls, I could hear him talking to himself or maybe someone on the phone. The next morning, he came back with fast food breakfast and acted like we were camping. He told me stories about his childhood and asked about my school and friends. I realized he wasn't planning to hurt me. He just wanted someone to talk to, someone who couldn't leave like everyone else in his life had. I started playing along. I called him sir and asked questions about his job at the lumber mill. Whenever I mentioned my parents, I made sure to say things like, "My dad's really good with computers and tracking stuff," or "My mom always knows when something's wrong with me." I hoped it would make him nervous about keeping me too long. Back at the gas station, a woman named Linda was cleaning the bathrooms during her evening shift. She found my note behind the trash can and almost threw it away, thinking it was just kids playing a prank. But something about the handwriting made her take it to her manager, who called the police immediately. They pulled the security footage and got a clear shot of the man's face and his license plate. The police matched the Honda to a stolen car report from 2 counties over. They started checking every back road and hunting cabin in a 50 miles radius. Meanwhile, the man kept leaving me alone for hours at a time while he went to town for supplies. On the third day, he was gone longer than usual. I was sitting on the trailer's front step when I heard cars coming down the dirt road. 2 police cruisers pulled up and officers jumped out with their hands on their weapons. One of them shouted, "Are you Kayla?" I nodded and ran toward them. They found the man 20 minutes later at a hardware store in town buying rope and duct tape. When they arrested him, he didn't fight or try to run. He just asked if I was okay and said he was sorry for scaring me. The whole thing lasted 3 days, but it felt like weeks. My parents were waiting at the police station when they brought me in. Mom cried so hard she couldn't speak, and Dad just held me for what felt like an hour. The man got 8 years in prison, and I had to testify at his trial. He looked different in the courtroom, smaller and sadder that I was 12 when this man in a gray hoodie approached me outside my art class. He knew my dad's name, Ryan, and said there had been an accident at the factory where Dad worked. He even knew I always bought strawberry Pop-Tarts from the vending machine after class. "Your dad sent me to get you to the hospital," he said, holding up his phone. It showed what looked like a text from Dad's number. "Pick up Kayla. Tell her I'm okay, but need her here." My stomach twisted, but I got in his beat-up Honda Civic. He smiled faintly as he drove off. At first, I tried to believe him, but then he turned onto Highway 52, away from the hospital. When I asked where we were going, he pressed the door locks with a loud click. "Change of plans, kiddo," he said flatly. Minutes later, I watched in horror as he rolled down the window and tossed my backpack and my phone out onto the highway. My heart dropped. I knew then I was in trouble. We drove for 2 hours. He didn't scream or threaten me like in movies. He was eerily calm, humming to an old country station, occasionally offering me beef jerky. He talked about his daughter. She'd be about your age now if my ex hadn't taken her away. His voice cracked like he was more sad than scary. We finally pulled into a Shell station in some tiny town I didn't recognize. Bathroom break, he said, guiding me inside with a firm grip on my shoulder. Inside the dingy bathroom, I saw it. A faded poster about human trafficking taped to the stall door. At the bottom it read, "If you're in danger, leave a note where someone will find it." My hands trembled as I dug into my jacket pocket. I had an art store receipt and a stubby pencil. I scribbled, "Help. Kidnapped in gray Honda. Please call police." I folded it tight and slipped it behind the overflowing trash bin, praying someone would see it. We drove deeper into the woods until we reached a rotting trailer. No power, boarded windows, and battery lanterns everywhere. He gave me a sleeping bag and some crackers, then locked the door from the outside. Through the thin walls, I heard him talking to himself, pacing. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the trailer made my chest tighten. The next morning, he returned with fast food breakfast like it was some camping trip. He asked about my school, my friends, even my favorite color. I realized something terrifying. He didn't seem like he wanted to hurt me. He wanted me to stay. I played along. I called him sir, listened to his stories about working at the lumber mill. I mentioned how my dad worked with computers and could track anything, and how my mom always knew when something was wrong. I wanted him scared enough to let me go. Meanwhile, back at that Shell station, a woman named Linda was cleaning the bathrooms during her evening shift. She almost tossed my note, thinking it was a prank, but something in my shaky handwriting stopped her. She brought it to her manager, who called police. They pulled security footage and got his face and license plate. By day 2, police had linked his car to a stolen vehicle report. They combed every back road, every hunting cabin within 50 miles. On the third day, I was sitting outside the trailer, staring at the endless woods, when I heard it. Engines. 2 police cruisers barreled down the dirt road, lights flashing. I froze, unsure if it was real until an officer leapt out, hand on his gun. "Are you Kayla?" he shouted. I nodded so hard it hurt. I ran, bare feet slapping the cold dirt. He scooped me up and carried me to the car while another officer kicked in the trailer door. They caught him 20 minutes later at a hardware store buying rope and duct tape. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just asked, "Is she okay?" before they cuffed him. At the station, Mom's scream when she saw me still echoes in my head. She held me so tightly I could barely breathe. Dad, my tough, quiet dad, sobbed openly for the first time in my life. Therapy became my new normal. I woke up from nightmares for months. I'd see gray hoodies at the mall and panic. Loud knocks on the door sent me hiding in closets. The trial was the worst. I had to sit just feet from him and testify. He looked so small in the courtroom, like a man already defeated. When I said, "He took me," I was so scared. His head dropped into his hands. He got 8 years. The judge said. It would have been longer if not for his lack of violence. But I still flinched every time I heard the word release date. Linda, the gas station worker who found my note, came to court. She hugged me afterward, crying. "You saved yourself, sweetheart," she said. "It's been 6 years. I still carry pencils in every jacket pocket. I still write receipts with my name on them and leave them where people will see. Because I know what it's like to pray someone finds your words in time. And I survived. But I'll never forget how close it came to being otherwise." Story 2. Yesterday started like any other Thursday. I was tired after my shift, looking forward to just grabbing some leftovers and crashing. I pulled my 2014 Toyota Corolla into our neighborhood. Well, my parents' neighborhood now, I guess. Around 6:30 p.m., as I turned onto our street, I noticed there was some kind of commotion ahead. People were standing on their lawns looking at something. It wasn't until I got closer that I realized they were all staring at our house. And all mine was scattered across the front yard. I'm not talking about just a few boxes. Everything I owned was thrown everywhere. My clothes were hanging from tree branches. My books were scattered across the driveway, getting soaked from the sprinklers. My gaming setup was in pieces on the sidewalk. Even my childhood stuff that I'd kept in storage boxes was dumped out. And there was my mom on the porch with a megaphone. An actual megaphone she must have ordered just for this. Attention, neighbors. We are finally evicting our 28-year-old failure son. I literally couldn't process what was happening. My dad was spray painting loser on my moving boxes while my sister Gabriella, 26, filmed the whole thing on her phone, laughing and adding commentary. This is what happens when you're a disappointment. My brother Sawyer, 30, had put up signs all over the lawn. Free stuff from a freeloading parasite, and people were actually picking through my belongings. Mrs. Canderson from next door was holding my high school yearbook and nodding along like this was completely normal. Mom kept going. He owes us $12,000. Hasn't paid rent in 2 years. That's, by the way, I've been paying them $600 a month since I moved back after college. Not as much as an apartment would cost, sure, but we had an agreement. They'd said they wanted to help me save up for a down payment. I've got the Venmo receipts to prove it. Dad spotted me sitting in my car and stormed over. He yanked my door open and grabbed my laptop bag from the passenger seat. That laptop had all my work projects on it. Before I could stop him, he smashed it on the driveway. Worthless computer for a worthless person. The screen shattered completely. I finally got out of my car. Mrs. Anderson actually started slow clapping. Thank God that eyesore is finally leaving. What eyesore? My car was always parked properly. I kept my room clean. I did chores around the house. Things got worse. Dad disappeared inside, then came to the second floor window of my room. He had my TV, the one I bought with my first paycheck out of college. He dropped it from the window. It exploded on the driveway. Everyone actually cheered. I've always been the family disappointment. Sawyer's the successful one with his fancy corporate job in the city. Gabriella is the perfect daughter who married rich. And I'm the one who came back home after struggling to find stable work after graduation. The economy was, but they never wanted to hear that. Everything was always your fault or your bad choices. I just stood there for a minute trying to keep it together. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. So, I smiled, walked to the lawn, and started loading what wasn't destroyed into my car. Dad kept taunting me the whole time, telling the neighbors how I was a drain on them, how I'd never amount to anything. Mom was listing all my failures. Dropping out of the soccer team in high school, I had a knee injury. Changing majors in college. From their choice to mine. Not having a girlfriend. I've been dating, just nothing serious. Before I got in my car, I turned to face them all. The whole neighborhood was watching. My family was laughing, and everything I couldn't fit in my car was getting picked over by strangers. Two can play this game, I said calmly. Soon you'll see my revenge. They all burst out laughing. Dad yelled, "What are you going to do, loser? You've got nothing and nobody." I just got in my car and drove away. Found this motel that takes weekly rates. It's not great, but it's somewhere to sleep while I figure things out. Here's the thing. What they don't know is that I've been documenting there for years. The constant put-downs. The loans they force me to take out for them. The way they take my rent money, but then tell everyone I live there for free. The times they borrowed from my account without asking. And I know things about Dad's business practices. About Mom's spending habits. About the money they've hidden from the IRS. They pushed me too far this time. They humiliated me in front of everyone. They destroyed my property. They lied about me to all our neighbors. I'm done being the family punching bag. I'm done trying to earn their approval. I'm done playing nice. It's been 24 hours, and I'm still piecing together what's salvageable for my life. But I've already made some calls. I'm staying calm, but inside I'm furious. And I know exactly where to hit them, where it hurts. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Update 1. First holy at all the messages. My inbox is absolutely destroyed. Thanks for the support. Seriously, it's been a wild week since the lawn eviction. Day 3 at the Motel 6, and I realized I couldn't stay there much longer without blowing through my emergency fund. The place smelled like cigarettes in desperation, and the Wi-Fi kept cutting out every 10 minutes. Not exactly ideal when you're trying to rebuild your digital life from cloud backups on a borrowed laptop. So, I posted on Nextdoor looking for temporary housing. Got a message from this older couple, the Hendersons, who live about 20 minutes from my parents' neighborhood. They had a spare room over their garage they were willing to rent me at a discount if I helped with some property maintenance. Mr. Henderson has a bad hip and can't do the yard work anymore. Perfect timing since I needed to save every penny. Moving in was kind of awkward. I didn't want to tell them the full story, but they kept asking why I had so few belongings. Finally, just said there was a family disagreement and left it at that. Mrs. Henderson gave me this look like she knew there was more to it, but didn't push. The room's small but clean, has its own bathroom and a mini fridge. Been crashing on their couch a lot, though, since Mrs. Henderson keeps inviting me down for dinner. I think they're lonely. Their kids live out of state and rarely visit. Meanwhile, my phone's been blowing up with texts from extended family. Apparently, my parents have been telling everyone I'm on drugs, and that's why they kicked me out. Classic. My cousin Rory texted asking if I needed rehab info. Had to send him the Venmo receipts showing my regular rent payments to prove I wasn't some freeloader. The drug thing is rich coming from them. Dad's been popping Xanax like candy for years. Mom drinks wine from breakfast to bedtime. But somehow, I'm the problem child because I changed my major from business to marketing and design against their wishes. Been working double shifts to build up some cash. My regular gig only had my backup portfolio, so I lost a bunch of my best recent work when Dad smashed my laptop. Luckily, I had most projects backed up to Google Drive, but still lost about 2 months of stuff. Yesterday, something weird happened. I went to file my taxes, late, I know, and the tax prep software flagged something about dependency status. Turns out my parents have been claiming me as a dependent for tax purposes the past 2 years despite charging me rent. That's literally tax fraud. So, I called their accountant, Roger. He's known me since I was a kid and always seemed decent. Said I needed some tax documents that might still be at my parents' house. He sounded uncomfortable when I explained what happened. After some awkward silence, he admitted my parents have been manipulating their finances in creative ways for years. Said he'd been trying to get them to clean things up, but they wouldn't listen. Roger mentioned that Dad opened a credit card in my name 3 years ago when I moved back home. I had no idea about this. Checked my credit report right away. Sure enough, there's a card with a $6,000 balance I never knew existed. That explains why my credit score tanked last year when I tried to get my own apartment. The pieces are starting to fit together now. My parents have been financially exploiting me while simultaneously shaming me publicly for being a burden. The $12,000 they claim I owe probably charges on the fraudulent credit card they opened. And it gets better. Remember how I mentioned Dad's business practices? Well, I ran into my old college friend Tristan yesterday. Complete coincidence. We were both at the same coffee shop. He works for Dad's biggest competitor now. We got to talking, and I mentioned the situation. Tristan said, my dad's company has a reputation for cutting corners and overbilling clients. Said they've been trying to get evidence of it for months to warn potential customers. I have years of overheard conversations, emails I was copied on by mistake, and documents I was asked to file away quietly when I helped at the office on weekends. Stuff that would absolutely tank Dad's reputation in the industry. Mom's no better. She's been running this whole perfect family image in their social circle while treating me like garbage behind closed doors. Always comparing me to Sawyer or Gabriella, always finding something to criticize. My room was too messy, even when it was clean. My car was an embarrassment, even though it's reliable and paid off. My clothes were sloppy, even when I dressed up. Nothing was ever good enough. It was always about appearances with them. Dad's business success, Mom's charity work, which she hates but does for the status, Sawyer's corporate job, Gabriella's rich husband, and then there's me, the disappointment who dared to follow his own path instead of the one they mapped out. I've started documenting everything. The fraudulent credit card, the tax fraud, the Venmo payments they claim never happened. I've got screenshots of texts where Mom acknowledged receiving my rent. I've got emails where Dad threatened to kick me out if I didn't contribute more. Even while I was already paying rent and helping around the house, called my cell provider yesterday to make sure they can't somehow access my new number. The customer service rep noticed there were 2 additional lines on my account I was paying for. Turns out they added their personal phones to my plan 3 years ago when my student discount made it. Discount made it cheaper. I've been paying for their cell phones this whole time. I'm not just angry anymore. I'm methodical. I'm calculating. Every day, I uncover more ways they've been using me while pretending I was the burden. I've got a meeting with a credit agency tomorrow about the fraudulent card already filed disputes on all the charges. Next step is compiling all the evidence of their tax fraud for a potential whistleblower. Report to the IRS. As for Dad's business, I'm meeting Tristan for lunch next week. He says his boss would be very interested in what I know. They thought they were punishing the family disappointment. They didn't realize they were creating their worst nightmare. Someone with nothing left to lose who knows all their secrets. The best part, they have no idea what's coming. They think I'm just off sulking somewhere, broken and humiliated. But I'm building something much more satisfying than they could imagine. Revenge isn't going to be quick. It's going to be thorough. Update 2. So, it's been about 3 weeks since the lawn eviction, and holy things are starting to happen. My hands are literally shaking as I type this update. First off, thank you for all the advice about the IRS whistleblower program. I didn't even know that was a thing until someone mentioned it in the comments. Turns out you can report tax fraud and potentially get a percentage of what they recover. I filed the report last week with all the evidence I had. The Venmo receipts of my rent payments, screenshots of text conversations where they acknowledged the arrangement, and proof they were claiming me as a dependent while collecting rent from me. The day after I submitted everything, I got a call from a blocked number. It was my dad. Somehow, he found out about the credit card disputes I'd filed. He was livid. Started by acting all fake concerned, asking where I was staying and if I was okay. Then switched to threatening me about making false accusations and ruining the family's reputation. I recorded the whole call. My state is one-party consent. When I told him I knew about the card he'd opened in my name, he completely changed tactics, claimed it was just to build my credit and that he was doing me a favor, right? Because maxing out a card I didn't know about and missing payments is super helpful for my credit score. I told him that identity theft and fraud are felonies, and he hung up on me. The next day, my mom showed up at my work. No idea how she found out where I was working since I got a new job at a small local place. She caused this whole scene in front of everyone, crying about how worried they've been and how I'm destroying the family with my false accusations. My coworkers were super confused. I took her outside to the parking lot before she could say anything specific. That's when she dropped the act. She hissed at me that I needed to withdraw the credit disputes immediately or they would press charges against me for stealing from them over the years. When I asked what I supposedly stole, she said, food, electricity, water. You think that's all free? I laughed in her face, told her I had receipts for every penny I'd paid them, and reminded her about the megaphone show they put on for the neighborhood. She slapped me across the face hard. I didn't hit back, just stepped away and told her to leave before I called the police. She left, but not before shouting that I'd regret this. Meanwhile, the meeting with Tristan and his boss went even better than expected. I brought all the documentation I had about Dad's business practices, the emails where he discussed overbilling clients, the internal records showing they used cheaper materials than what they charged for. Even the handbook he gave me when I helped in the office that literally had a section about how to upsell unnecessary services. Tristan's boss was shocked at how blatant it all was. They're not just using this info to compete with Dad. They're actually reaching out to his current clients with evidence of his fraudulent practices. Apparently, several have already backed out of contracts with him and are exploring legal options. Dad's business is taking a serious hit. Last weekend was when things got really intense. My sister Gabriella texted asking to meet for coffee. I was suspicious, but agreed to see her at a Starbucks. She showed up looking stressed and not nearly as put together as usual. Her perfect Instagram life was showing some cracks. Turns out Dad had asked Gabriella and her husband for a loan to cover some temporary business setbacks. When she asked for details, he brushed her off. She started asking questions and heard rumors about clients leaving. So, she came to me. I didn't reveal everything, but I made it clear that Dad's business problems weren't temporary and that our parents had been financially exploiting me for years. Showed her the credit card statements. Her reaction surprised me. Instead of defending them, she got quiet, then admitted that they'd done similar things to her when she was in college, borrowing from her student loans, using her first credit card without permission. The difference is she married rich and escaped. I became their new target. And Sawyer, he's always been the golden child who could do no wrong. Probably because he sends them money regularly to keep them off his back. Gabriella tried to convince me to stop what I'd set in motion, not to protect them, but because she's worried about the fallout affecting her image by association. Her in-laws are super status conscious, and a scandal involving tax fraud and business malpractice would be embarrassing for her. I told her I wasn't stopping anything. They made their choice when they humiliated me in front of the entire neighborhood and destroyed my property. She left upset, but I could tell she wasn't going to warn them. She's protecting herself first. The real breakthrough came yesterday. I've been documenting everything on a private Google Drive, and I decided to create a separate folder with just the evidence about their lies regarding my rent payments and dependent status. I shared it with a few key neighbors who were present during the lawn eviction, including Mrs. Anderson, who had clapped and called me an eyesore, sent it with a simple message explaining that my parents had been charging me rent while telling everyone I lived there for free, and included the Venmo records. No accusations, just facts. Within hours, my phone was blowing up with texts from other neighbors who had seen the evidence. Apparently, it spread quickly through the neighborhood group chat. Mom called me screaming, said people were messaging her asking if it was true that they'd lied about me not paying rent. Some neighbors had even brought up other instances where my parents had lied about stuff, like claiming they donated to the neighborhood fund when they hadn't, or taking credit for community work they never did. Their carefully crafted image is crumbling and they're panicking. Then this morning, I got an email from Dad's biggest client requesting a meeting. They'd heard from multiple sources about questionable business practices and wanted to talk to me directly before making any decisions about their ongoing projects with Dad's company. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. I know this might sound like I'm being vindictive, but after what they did to me, after years of being treated like the family disappointment, while they literally stole from me and lied about me, they deserve every bit of this. This isn't just about the lawn eviction. It's about the lifetime of emotional abuse, the constant comparisons to my siblings, the manipulation, the financial exploitation. They created this situation, not me. All I'm doing is telling the truth, with evidence to back it up. The best part, my credit score already went up 30 points since the fraudulent card was removed from my report. I've got a lead on an affordable apartment that doesn't require perfect credit, and I've been saving every penny from my two jobs. I'm not just surviving without them. I'm building something better. Meanwhile, their carefully constructed facade is falling apart brick by brick. The meeting with Dad's client tomorrow could be the final blow to his business. I'm nervous, but ready. No more being the family punching bag. Final update. Been about 6 weeks since this nightmare started. And holy you guys, the phrase karmas. It doesn't even begin to cover what's happened. So, that meeting with my dad's biggest client, I was nervous AF walking in. They'd booked a conference room at a Marriott. And when I got there, 3 people in suits were waiting. 2 from the client company and 1 guy they introduced as their attorney. That's when I knew this was serious. I brought my folder of evidence. Not to dump everything on them, but to back up anything they questioned. They started by asking why I was doing this. Was it just revenge? I was straight with them. Told them about the lawn eviction, the years of emotional abuse, and how I discovered the financial exploitation. Then I showed them specific examples of where my dad had overcharged them, substituted cheaper materials, and billed for work that was never completed. The lawyer kept taking notes while the other 2 looked increasingly pissed. They asked detailed questions about specific projects, and I could answer most of them because I'd helped with the paperwork on weekends. By the end, they weren't even hiding their anger. They thanked me for coming forward and said they'd be conducting a full audit of all work my dad's company had done for them. 2 days later, my phone exploded, like 20-plus messages flooding. In every second, just like I'd promised on the lawn that day. The first text was from Sawyer. Dad's lost the client contract worth almost $1 million. Apparently, they're also suing him for fraud and breach of contract. The second was from Gabriella. Mom's freaking out because the neighbors are avoiding her, and someone anonymously informed her country club friends about the lawn eviction and how they'd been lying about me. Third was from my dad himself. Worthy are you? You've ruined everything. Fourth from Mom. Please call us. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Then more texts from random relatives, family, friends, even my dad's business associates, all wanting my sides of the story since my parents were apparently telling everyone I was mentally unstable and making things up. I didn't respond to any of them, just watched as my inbox filled up. The next morning, I got a call from Roger, the accountant. He sounded stressed and kept his voice low, like he was worried about being overheard. Said, my parents had received notice of an IRS audit based on credible information from a whistleblower. They were in full panic mode, shredding documents and arguing about who was to blame. Roger admitted he'd tried to warn them for years that their creative accounting would catch up with them eventually. Now he was distancing himself to avoid getting dragged down with them. Smart guy. I finally answered one of Gabriella's calls that afternoon. She was surprisingly calm. Said Dad had already lost 3 more clients who'd heard about the lawsuit. The business was hemorrhaging money. Mom had been uninvited from her charity committee after someone shared screenshots of the megaphone incident. Gabriella wasn't calling to guilt trip me. Surprisingly, she just wanted to know if I was okay and to warn me that Dad had been driving around looking for me. I thanked her for the heads up and suggested she might want to check her own credit report just in case. That weekend, the Hendersons invited me to dinner and mentioned there had been a strange man in a BMW asking around the neighborhood about me. They hadn't told him anything. Thankfully, Mr. Henderson actually patted my shoulder and said I seemed like a good kid who got dealt a bad hand. First time in years anyone from my parents' generation had shown me basic human decency. Week 5 is when things got really wild. My brother Sawyer showed up at my workplace. He looked like unshaven, bags under his eyes, expensive clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. He begged me to call off the IRS. Said Dad was facing penalties of over $100,000 plus possible criminal charges for the identity theft with the credit card. I asked him why I should care after what they did to me. His answer was unexpected. Dad had a stress-induced cardiac event, not a full heart attack, but close, and was in the hospital. Mom was blaming me, saying I was killing my own father. For a split second, I actually felt guilty. Then I remembered how they destroyed my belongings, humiliated me publicly, and stolen from me for years. I told Sawyer I'd visit Dad in the hospital, but I wasn't stopping anything that was already in motion. The hospital visit was awkward as Mom tried to physically block me from entering Dad's room, hissing that I'd done enough damage. A nurse had to intervene. Dad looked smaller somehow, hooked up to monitors. When he saw me, he didn't yell or threaten like I expected. Instead, he tried manipulation, saying he was sorry if he'd been a bit harsh and that we needed to put family first. Now, I just looked at him and asked if he remembered what he'd said while smashing my laptop on the driveway. Worthless computer for a worthless person. He had the audacity to claim he didn't remember saying that. Classic Dad. Selective memory when it suits him. I left after 5 minutes. Didn't see any point in arguing with someone who would never admit fault. Mom followed me to the parking lot, switching between crying about how I was destroying the family and threatening that I'd regret this when they were completely ruined. What they don't get is that I never wanted to ruin them. I just wanted consequences for their actions. For once in their lives, I wanted them to face the results of their choices instead of manipulating or bullying their way out of trouble. Last week, Gabriella called with an update. Mom and Dad are selling the house. They can't afford it anymore with the business failing and the IRS penalties. They're downsizing to a condo about half the size. Dad's business is basically over. I know one wants to work with him after the lawsuit went public in industry circles. The sweet part, Tristan's company offered me a position after they saw how thorough my documentation was. I start next month with better pay than I've ever had. The Henderson son is moving back to town, so I found my own apartment that I can actually afford now. Yesterday, both my parents showed up at my current job. I was helping a customer when they walked in, looking completely different from the confident, polished couple they'd always been. Dad had lost weight. Mom's perfect highlights had grown out. They asked if we could talk privately. For almost an hour, they took turns between apologizing and guilt-tripping. Mom cried about how they might lose everything. Dad said they were just trying to motivate me that day on the lawn. They claimed they'd always had my best interests at heart, even when charging me rent and claiming me as a dependent, which makes zero logical sense. Then they asked if I would consider dropping the IRS whistleblower claim in exchange for them paying me back the rent money. Too little, too late. I told them the investigation was already happening. I couldn't stop it now, even if I wanted to. And frankly, I didn't want to. They'd made their choices for years. The lawn eviction wasn't some one-off bad day. It was the culmination of a lifetime of emotional abuse and exploitation. Mom tried one last manipulation, saying that families should forgive each other. I just looked her in the eyes and asked if she remembered standing on the porch with a megaphone, announcing to the whole neighborhood that I was a failure and a freeloader. She didn't have an answer for that. I'm not going to lie and say I feel nothing but satisfaction. There are moments I question if I went too far. But then I remember how they destroyed my belongings, humiliated me publicly, and systematically exploited me financially for years. They weren't just strict parents. They were abusers who got caught. So that's where things stand now. I've got my own place, a better job, and a future that doesn't involve being anyone's punching bag. My parents are facing the consequences of their actions for probably the first time in their lives. Sawyer's actually been texting me about normal brother stuff lately. Gabriella's keeping her distance from all of us while she figures out her own relationship with our parents. The nuclear phone messages I promised them on the lawn that day turned out to be the fallout from their own lies and manipulations finally catching up with them. Sometimes revenge isn't about what you do to someone else. It's about letting them face the natural consequences of their own actions. For everyone who supported me through this, thank you. I never would have had the courage to stand up for myself without your advice and encouragement. For anyone else dealing with toxic family members, document everything. Know your worth and don't let them gaslight you into thinking their abuse is normal.